One thing I never understood about games is how so many of them boast about having so many distinct combinations of customizations. Whether it be in the customization of characters, the number of unique abilities, or even the number of weapons, these immense figures about adjustable options seem intriguing, especially at first glance. I mean, that is typically what games are about, right? I think games feel significantly deeper and more enjoyable when they master a customization system. I enjoy having to select between different weapons in my Fortnite loadout, or choosing what fighter to select before my next round in Lethal League Blaze. These customizable options add variety to games, which helps keep them interesting. It's fun to try these new experiences, it's what we play games for. Despite thinking that this should be the case, unlocking them rarely brings me much joy. It's not that I don't enjoy unlocking new things, in fact, it's the opposite. However, the way many of these options are implemented does not make it seem like I got something new, and ultimately fail at creating a meaningful experience. Today, on this episode of Gaming Keystones, I'm going to talk about the significance behind customization, and why so many games fail to make their customization options memorable. Customization comes through many mediums. It can be developed by implementing different movesets for a character, adjusting cart pieces, or even just selecting a color for a t-shirt. It's all so vague and so all-encompassing that pretty much every game has it. Thus, to properly analyze it, it's important to segment these selectable options into different categories. The main ones I encounter are cosmetic customization and character customization. Despite these being very different, the crucial aspect behind the successful customization option is that it should be viable. When customization is simply cosmetic, I never have an issue with an abundant selection. Even if there are customization options that I can't rationalize wearing, in this case, simply more is better. An unending quantity of different selectable styles is preferable because everyone has unique tastes, especially since no option is the correct choice. I always appreciate the ability to alter simple cosmetic attributes about my character, as it brings me just a bit closer to feeling like I have a genuine role in the game. In fact, I'm not sure that there is much of a justification against including it apart from the time commitment from the team. People literally pay to adjust cosmetics, so clearly there's some value behind them. Some games even encourage designing and creating a hub world as a primary progression tool. Fishing Paradiso and Staxel pride themselves in having a surplus of different ways to personalize their experience. In fact, I would say that the cosmetic enhancement can sometimes be more of a motivating factor than many of their other gameplay experiences. In these games, though, there's no correct answer. Customization is fundamental to enjoying them. It works to their benefit, though. For example, in Fishing Paradiso, I can customize my house. It's a simple thing, but some non-playable characters will give me different trinkets with which I can decorate. Since these items do not have special attributes, there's no proper way to decorate my room, and thus I can evaluate and re-evaluate my layouts as my tastes change. This makes it exciting to collect each of these new different items, because regardless of whether I enjoy the item at face value, it increases the number of viable options. The key thing here is that for customization option to be meaningful or exciting, it has to be viable. Since every cosmetic item does the same thing, every cosmetic item is viable, and thus, each item adds a bit to the available customization. On the other hand, I often see games where there are numerous different abilities for a main character. Take Trifox, for example. It gave me the option to select 4 of a bunch of different abilities. It's a simple premise, and it gave me the opportunity to not only explore different options, but completely revolutionize my character throughout the course of the game. However, I did not like the customization options it provided. This came as somewhat of a surprise, as each of these selections were quite viable. There were different ways to use my hammer, adjustable turrets, and even different dashing abilities. In premise, they were all very clever. Sure, none of the customizations had a huge skill ceiling, but they altered my abilities enough to be distinct and at least somewhat interesting. Despite this, I hardly interacted with the adjustments. This leads to the next crucial point. The level designs must encourage or at least be significantly impacted by the selected adjustments. Otherwise, the adjustments will be meaningless. I constantly had to evaluate my different charms and healer's quests because I kept losing otherwise. However, even in easier games this is prevalent. The Pokemon games make it obvious that switching in a Pokemon with a type advantage is important, and I typically found myself doing so, at least when I was not obnoxiously overleveled. Even Mortal Kombat encouraged me to interact with different customizable adjustments in certain towers of time, where I could add bonus upgrades to my main character. While it works sometimes, in so many games I don't need to interact with the customizable options. This works two ways. Some games implement their customizable options like Trifox does, giving a couple of different options but hardly encouraging me to adjust my selection. That's what happened to me in Hive Jump. The loadout I ended up selecting most frequently rarely had any downsides, so I didn't interact much with the customizable options as I found one that I enjoyed playing with. The issue is prevalent in multiverses too. Sure, I don't even have half of them unlocked, but each character has a bunch of different traits that can impact their abilities in combat. Despite having so much potential for depth, I can't find myself adjusting much. Even in games like Pokemon, where they encourage me to select the right Pokemon, I find myself sticking with the same items and just using the same attacks, as there's very little to incentivize me to adjust those. I find these situations frustrating, as I often look at the different options and wish I wanted to try something new. However, I struggle to do things like that when things that I am doing work swimmingly. I think one game that nailed this aspect of customization is Eldest Souls. It's a top-down Souls-like where I had to slay different beasts. It features a bunch of customizable perks. Each boss awarded me with a different gemstone that adds attributes to my special abilities. However, in addition to that, I got to choose between 3 different classes that increased varying amounts of my attacking capabilities and defense. The complexity and significance of the distribution coupled with the innate difficulty of the game and encouraged me to adjust my composition from time to time. It made the game more dynamic and interesting too. Despotism 3000 also forced me to innovate. This game is a simulation game where I attempt to sustain an ecosystem of people to work for me and create power. I have different facilities for them to engage with, but each costs power, and without enough power, I lose. It was a constantly evolving dynamic, where as my structure increased, my power needs increased too. I constantly had to see where my bottleneck was, and decide where to invest any excess power. However, in addition to the continuous long-term planning I did, I had to make decisions on the fly. Every few cycles I had to deal with an event. Sometimes, these events would impact me in ways that forced me to reconsider how I customized my build, pushing me to consider both the events that had taken place and potential events that would arise in the future. Since the game allowed me to choose where to allocate my energy production, I was always in control. Each option was viable, but the game incentivized me to plan around new circumstances that could deteriorate certain investments. The continually updating systems in Despotism 3000 made customizing each run a lot of fun. Even when games provide multiple viable alternatives and offer reason to adjust, sometimes these systems still fall flat. I find that this often stems from me not wanting to waste time selecting options when the task at hand can be managed without it. Whether I'm too stubborn to go back to a previous bench to adjust my charms before a boss in Hollow Knight, or whether I don't want to alter my weapon loadout in the settings of Bayonetta 3, it's often far simpler, at least in the short run, to continue with the selections I already have. I think this was made abundantly clear to me when I played through the Smash Bros. Ultimate campaign. The story mode focuses on spirits, collectible items that adjust in-game properties for the characters. They are novel enough, and they offer some decent variety. However, when I first began the single-player campaign, I was very comfortable with the game mechanics already. Regardless of their special abilities and traits, I was taking out fighters with ease. This meant that I did not care about pretty much any of the differences in spirits. However, spirits would have made the game more enjoyable. Some fights could have been made a lot easier with spirits, and it's not like I didn't use them at all, but navigating through the spirit menu took a long time. I had to wait a while for things to load, and then equip the spirit, and then I have to wait for the fight to load after that. Half the time, I avoided adjusting my spirits altogether, even when I had some frustrating mechanic to handle, as the way to adjust my abilities just took too long to use. It made the whole spirit mode much more disappointing. The issue here is that even if a concept adds depth theoretically, if it's not worth the time investment, I'm not going to interact with the mechanic. I think some developers recognize this. Think about weapon wheels. Instead of having to search deep into my inventory, games make it incredibly easy. Fortnite even does this with their cosmetic items, and they allow me to customize the available ones. Without ease of access, customizable mechanics become so much less effective. Soldiers does this well. It's a Metroidvania, and to progress I need to use a variety of different customization options. As I explore through the world, I collect different gemstones that give me different elemental abilities. They're not very special. In fact, they're very simple. Some enemies are weak to some elements, while others are weak to others. Sure, there are some different interactable objects that require the use of these gems, but the mechanics are nowhere near riveting. Regardless, if I wanted to progress, I needed to use the tools I unlocked. However, unlike Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, I did not mind. I didn't mind switching my attacking capabilities all the time to match the weaknesses of my enemies. It felt rewarding and interesting to interact with it in soldiers because it was so easy to do. All I had to do was click one button on my keyboard, and immediately I changed to a different active stone. Sure, it is undoubtedly enhanced because many of these fights are challenging, and of course the Metroidvania style strongly encouraged me to use my abilities, but nonetheless, Soldiers makes it very rewarding to experiment with my customizable options. Cuphead does this excellently too. New weapons can be picked up and equipped practically instantaneously. However, to keep the selection from becoming overwhelming, I'm only allowed to carry 2 weapons at once. This makes it very easy to switch between weapons and encourages me to take a conscious thought about which weapons I'll select, making the customizable options far more rewarding too. On the other side of the spectrum, Fashion Police Squad also encourages me to select between different weapons. It forces me to select between my different weapons by forcing me to attack certain fashion injustices. Each weapon in my arsenal only targets a specific issue, and thus can only be used on certain enemies. Instead of going in guns blazing, the game forces me to select exactly which weapon to use, requiring that I select something that will combat the encroaching style atrocities. I enjoyed testing the intricacies of my different weapons and selecting how to prioritize the different foes throughout my playthrough. It was super engaging. In sum, games need to make their customization options viable, but they also need to provide a reason to adjust and make it easy to implement those adjustments. Without these 3 crucial elements, customization systems that could be very interesting fail to engage me. Even though customization is not required to make a game fun, customization that is memorable and interesting takes a lot of thought and proper planning. Regardless of the medium, when trying to engage others with option selection, make sure that all or at least many of the options are viable. Show the significance of the decision and make the decision process easy to access. Thank you so much for watching.